this day two of the labor strike. Negotiation is still ongoing and it will be continued. We will continue to have this negotiation for the past 1 week. Good morning and welcome to the Dailies, where we will be looking at various stories that are making it to the headlines on our front page of the paper. I am Selela Shadasho and I'll be in the program alongside Rachel Tanzi. Good morning, Rachel.
I'm fine, and you?
Look at some of the papers and we will be starting with the first newspaper.
On first news, 494,000 naira minimum wage demand unrealistic. LP says urges federal government labor to return to negotiation table. World Bank pledges $45 billion to combat food crisis in Africa and others. YF not celebrated birthday as governor. This is Governor Diri saying so. You can find details to why he haven't inside the paper. And on minimum wage, banks, schools, hospitals shut down as strike ground activities in Ogun. Enzo takes over as Chelsea head coach. The big story: minimum wage nationwide strike cripples key services, businesses, airports, hospitals, power supply grounded. ASU, TC and others join as unrest escalates. Federal government begs labor to return to negotiation table, fixes meeting with union leaders Tuesday, which is today. CBN revokes Heritage Bank PLC license to safeguard financial stability. And if you're banking with Heritage Bank, I believe it's important that you take immediate action. Unknown gunmen kill village head in Taraba State, and that's all the news on First News newspaper.
On the Vanguard newspaper, still here coming from CBN, Richard said you can do well to look why that action was taken on the bank. Still on the Vanguard newspaper, Nama MD wants reversal of 50% IGR deduction. A committee canvasses 1% revenue cost of collection. And coming from Ajero, he says government reforms shouldn't push Nigerians into poverty. You can read more on page 21. Labour shut Nigeria as wage talks resumes today. Soldier bar journalists from OSGF as Akume meets Labour. Federal government asks Labour to return to negotiation. Tinubu, Akpabio, Abbas meet in Asu Rock. Army dismisses NLC allegation on surrounding meeting venue. Blackout looms as workers shut down power sector. Oil workers stop distribution. Schools, airport shut. Flight grounded, passengers stranded. Federal government labor must return to negotiation table to avert mass suffering coming from Labour Party. Muslim pilgrims stranded as strike forces plane to return empty to Saudi Arabia. Consider workers' plight, take action to implement living wage. This is Khan telling the federal government. More detail concerning the strike can be found on page 5. And we have a picture story showing us the NLC stroke the TUC strike in Lagos, where we can see the chairperson over there in Lagos during their strike. One is on our word, another also is here talking about Emoji takes over at Zenith Bank GMD, and also the CEO of the bank. So you can take a proper look at the front page and other stories if it is of interest to you.
On Leadership newspaper, we have story concerning minimum wage, labor being on strike and their demands and what it has cost to businesses and what the presidency is saying. Also, there is a fast check concerning what Ezekwesili said about the national anthem. You can find details on page 2, and that's all the news on Leadership newspaper.
All right, let's take a look at Daily Sun newspaper, where we will be looking at bank bad loan. Poor due diligence cost Heritage Bank its license. NDIC begins liquidization process to pay depositors maximum of 5 million naira each. Fear grips Makurdi as herdsmen attack, injure 6. I hope that the governor of Benue State will do something about that. Federal government labor decide new minimum wage in a week, so we look forward to seeing what the new wage will. The taking place in the FCT. You can do well to grab the paper and read more detail of any of the stories of interest to you.
On Nigerian Tribune, CBN revokes Heritage Bank's operations license. Presidential Tax Reform Committee molds Nigeria's Revenue Service to replace FIRS. You can find details on page 6. The big story, minimum wage total shutdown as NLC TUC begins strike. The writer under the story, government secretariats, businesses, hospitals, airports, seaport, power supply affected. Shell strike now comply with legal procedures, police tell Labour. Call of strike, return to roundtable, federal government appeals to Labour. Don't be tired of negotiations, Sultan appeals to workers. SGF in emergency meeting with Labour leaders. You can find details on page 325 and 30. Police will abide by federal government decision on state policing. This is a statement from the IGP. Tragedy at Force headquarters as DCP dies in office. Army hands over 8 rescued students to Kogi government. Details can be found on page 4, and that's all the news on Nigerian Tribune.
On Daily Independent newspaper, we will abide by the federal government decision on state police coming from the IGP. Asks NLC TUC to shelve illegal strike. You can read more detail of that in the down. The big story as well here says Labour cuts power, shuts court, airport ministries and schools. Indigenous airline operators lament loss of over 1 billion naira. Labour leaders chase workers away from office and duty posts. Federal government and Labour reach agreement on minimum wage. More detail can be found on page 29. Khan urges dialogue compromise to resolve ongoing strike. Lament economic impact of action on vulnerable citizens. More detail found on page 7. And on Rivers crisis, tempest over now. Delivery coming from Rivers State Governor Fubara. LPCISLAC asks the federal government and Labour to dialogue in Nigerians' interest. As well, we have stakeholders worry over timing of Heritage Bank license revocation. We have NDIC commence bank liquidation to pay depositors. Reps assure on safeguarding depositors' fund. And then downside we have NMA assures on continuous service amid the Labour strike. More detail of these can be found on page 6. And that's all on Daily Independent newspaper.
On Nigerian News Direct, CBN gives nod to OPay, PalmPay orders to resume onboarding new customers. We have Jergu Power, Siemens Energy Inc. deal to upgrade generation capacity to 1,200 megawatts. OPEC retains Nigeria's crude quota at 1.5 million barrels per day for 2025. Access Bank backs IFC recognition as best trade partner bank. Details can be found on page 14. The big story, Labour strike, federal government commits to minimum wage over 60,000 naira. Tripartite committee to meet daily to determine new wage. Nationwide blackout as Labour shuts down national grid. Maritime workers strike paralyzes seaport operations. Ex-NLC president suggests 100,000 naira minimum wage. You can find details on page 13. Heritage Bank loses banking license as NDIC assures depositors of payment of dividends. Debt profile, Cardoso preaches transparency, interagency collaboration to foster investors' confidence. You can find details on page 14. And that's all the news on Nigerian News Direct.
Richard, I'm happy the negotiation is still ongoing. And I believe this is what Nigerians want, in as much as we're seeing some of the papers saying that the government is saying that they should call off the strike when negotiation continues. But I don't believe Labour is going to call off the strike, because the only way the attention of the government can be drawn is when we see everything being shut down. Now we're seeing that travelers are stranded. Everybody seems to be on a standstill. Why? Because things that are supposed to help you. I mean, a number of people for the past 2 days right now, there is no power. So, of course, imagine for small businesses, I am imagining what they have to go through presently. So eventually we're seeing that Everybody's going to pay for this, but we just need the country to get moving. And when I was looking at the ex-NLC president suggesting 100 minimum wage, we're getting somewhere. Because I believe that Labour will want more than that. But I believe this is getting somewhere. It's beginning to make sense if the federal government is going to suggest this. Because when you take a look at some of the allowances, talking about our senators, talking about even those in the House of Representatives, but let's look at our senators, because they are the ones who mostly champion issues such as these, and they are the ones I was expecting to pass a bill and say, you know what, looking at the fact that we collect over 1.something million naira for hardship allowance, and we don't go through the hardship Nigerians go through.
Yeah.
So why don't we actually look into doing, increasing this minimum wage, because they deserve it. They work better. If you need to go through X, Facebook and other social media handles, you get to see what Nigerians are saying, because this is the only place Nigerians get to air their view. And we know the country we're in now, a little protest and all of that, we have people who always look forward to such thing to take advantage of it and cause chaos. But I'm hoping that during this week of negotiation, there will be a talk today, that the federal government will please reason with Nigerians, because believe me, nothing is easy. You cannot price anything in the market right now. The prices are outrageous. We know the way transportation is presently, even though fuel has reduced a bit, but believe you me, motorists are not ready to reduce the transport fare. It's already 300 naira to go, so you have to keep paying 300 naira. And that is the way. We've never seen a time in Nigeria whereby the moment certain things go down, we see prices going down. It's always going higher. So I am hoping that with this negotiation, the federal government should please be reasonable. I do not see this strike as being illegal. They might say it has been illegal or insensitive, but believe you me, if only the Minister of Labour, because she said that. But I'm hoping that you look at it, 9-point-something trillion naira is what I believe the government can actually, because you haven't given us account of how much from last year till today. We are paying, we have stopped paying for subsidy. How much have we saved? And all of that. So let's just keep our fingers crossed. I'm really hoping that the federal government will be reasonable this time around, because if the president is saying he will pay higher than 60,000, so I'm looking forward to seeing what is that amount that will be higher than the present 60,000 naira.
So you and I were just going through some of these allowances, and there are just so many allowances that don't make sense, but they are just tiny, and they're copying hundreds of thousands and millions. And one of the ones that stood out for us was the hardship allowance. And so the hardship allowance alone is higher than what Labour is proposing as the minimum wage. Just hardship. And then the question is, what hardship do our ministers go through? Let's not forget that when they have aid, they have security personnel, it's all covered. It doesn't come from their pocket. We saw that they have entertainment allowance. We saw that they have vehicle maintenance allowance, motor main allowance. They have wardrobe allowance. They have
entertainment.
Entertainment. They have allowance for every tiny thing. No wonder they can't even sit down and decide and say multi-choice should cut down their price, because they have no idea what Nigerians are going through to be entertained as it is now, as little as it might be. And yet they still, after all of these things being taken care of, they still have a hardship allowance. And you can't just help but wonder. And your hardship allowance, for example, is more than what Labour is proposing as the minimum wage, and you call them insensitive. You are the insensitive one. You are the premature one. As far as I'm concerned, despite what the economic risks will be, 60,000 naira is not a price for a minimum wage that we will say Labour is being insensitive or premature. The government can call it illegal. They can call it what they want to. What is illegal is having hardship allowance of 600,000 when every other thing is being paid for you. You don't fuel your car, you don't pay for your entertainment, there is medical allowance, there's wardrobe. That is what is insensitive. Having a hardship allowance despite having every other thing being paid for and catered for you by the government, that is what is being insensitive, and not Labour trying to see that a Nigerian citizen is being well compensated for the current hardship that is being caused by this administration. We are saving from subsidy. Fuel pump price is as high as what it is today because
Mm.
you took out subsidy and you want to stay at 60,000 naira as minimum wage. A matter of fact, you started at 48,000. That's an insult to Nigerians whatsoever. 60,000 is still an insult to citizens of Nigeria. It's very insensitive. It's just our government telling us who they are. We see ministers, we see people talking and asking us to be considered. And then the question is your minimum wage 60,000 naira? Is your take home 60,000 naira? Are you feeling what Nigerians are going through? When you go to the market, food inflation is as a result of the floating of the currency. It's as a result of the diesel price, the fuel pump price. It's as a result of how much farmers are buying fertilizer, a bag over 50,000. It's not every farmer, just so we know, that get access to the free ones given by government. It's not every farmer that get access to that. What about transportation costs? What about every other thing that is being put in place to make sure that this food gets to us? And when we look around us, we see that we consume imported things a lot, Sele, in this country. And we are looking at an exchange rate that is outrageous as it is now. And these are all the things that your policies, your economic reforms and policy is the reason why we have so this much high inflation, be it in food and the headline inflation and every other thing. We see people talking about what landlords, house owners are doing now concerning rent. It's under you that you agree to take out tariff for subsidy for electricity, and now we are having tariff this high. And now you are saving up all of this money from subsidy removal from fuel, subsidy removal from electricity and every other thing that Nigerians are paying for, because you have stopped subsidizing it as a government, and still yet you want to stay at 60,000 naira and call yourself sensitive. No, you are the insensitive one, and the Labour is the only sensitive group or union currently in Nigeria. The organized private sector is not even helping the matter. If we want to talk about them, I mean, Sele, they are something else on another level. You wouldn't even want to dissect that sector because there's just so much exploitation, and they are proud of their exploitation, and they won't even hide it that much, to the extent that they were okay at 54,000 at first. As far as they are concerned, it's the government that is moving to 60,000 naira, not them. It is really a thing of concern, and it's very alarming, and Labour should do whatever it takes. The government is capable, Sell, of paying above 100,000 naira as minimum wage. They are. Even if you're to make it $100, that is 130,000 naira. Will the Nigerian government sit down and tell me that they can't pay $100 as minimum wage to their citizens? They tell me they can't pay $200, $300. I believe that they are capable of it. They are. So don't be insensitive, our government, our senators and all of that. Do the needful by Nigerians. This hardship is as a result of your economic reforms. And until we start seeing the dividends of these economic reforms, as you have promised us, you know what you're doing, upgrade this minimum wage to a sensitive amount.
Well, let's just wait, Rachel. I don't want to say much about this, but let me just give them the benefit of that for this first week.
Yes.
This week that they are going to negotiate. I think from that, Nigerians will be able to tell that if this government truly feels their pain, as it claimed that it actually knows how they feel. Well, let's take a look at another paper, which is the Guardian newspaper. And on the Guardian newspaper, still concerning the issue of the strike here, we're seeing businesses grown. As labor grounds economic activity, we can see various picture columns showing the result of the strike, travelers stranded, and then we're seeing labor for particular state as well, trying to show their solidarity concerning the issue of that, and we hope that the government will listen. Still on strike, we have PANSEC shut down National Assembly and cut electricity supply. NLC tackles the federal government and National Assembly for prioritizing national anthem bill over workers' welfare. And I believe this is what Nigerians are feeling. With hunger, and then you are forcing them to learn a national anthem that they do not want to. I think that is very insensitive. Let the government look into that. Depositors worry as NDIC begins Heritage Bank liquidation. Detail of that can be found on page 15. towards the local government that work. This is an editorial you can find on page 12. And on the judiciary discretion, when bench deposition goes against the law, that's a news analysis you can find on page 4. Mandate INEC to learn from South African polls. Herua tells the National Assembly. You can find why they said that on page 5. We still have the picture story showing us when the new GMD of Zenith is resuming. We can see how with other stakeholders of the bank, and that's all on the Guardian newspaper.
On the Punch newspaper, I'm working to improve quality of life. Statement from President Tinubu. Heritage Bank NDIC begins refund. Highest depositors get 5 million naira. CBN NDIC asks creditors to file claims. Reps urge transparency. Details can be found on page 25. IOC is not selling crude to our refinery, says Dangote. Details can be found on page 27. The big story, minimum wage. Federal government offers over 60,000 naira. Labor may end strike. Negotiation panel to meet daily. NLC, TUC, ground schools, banks, and power grid. You can find details on page 2 and 21. Foreign reserves fall by $1.8 billion in 10 weeks. Water from Benin. We have border agencies rescue Ogun communities after Punch report. Nigeria UAE face-off settle. Visa issuance begins soon. An assurance from the federal government. You can find details on page 21, and that's all the news on the Punch newspaper.
All right, before we continue further looking at the negotiation that is still ongoing, the issue concerning the Heritage Bank, where their license has been revoked, as well as other stories on the front page of the paper. We would love you to take your time through the story, and when we come back from the break, we will continue to actually analyze the papers. Please stay tuned with us.
The gospel of Jesus Christ is our Heavenly Father's plan for the happiness and salvation of His children. Equa Television International shares the gospel of Jesus Christ because the world must come to the realization of the power in the atonement of sin through the grace and mercy of Jesus Christ. Sharing with the world the message of hope that can clean anyone from sin to enjoy the peace that is in Him. Equa Television International is live 24/7, preaching the message of salvation and truth to the world. Pray for Equa TV. Support Equa TV. Be part of Equa TV. Keep watching Equa Television International.
Thank you for staying tuned. It's still the Dailies. We have been analyzing various stories on the front page of the paper, ranging from where we can see that businesses have been grounded as a result of the strike that is ongoing. You can take a look at from the power sector, airport, and even schools and banks are actually going through with the strike as well. And we're seeing that daily there will be a meeting to see if this amount can be increased, as the federal government have promised that they will increase the money beyond 60,000, as well as we're seeing that the ex-NLC president is suggesting 100,000 or more. So we will just keep our fingers crossed and see how this whole negotiation will go. And as well, we are seeing where Hiruwa is telling INEC to learn from South Africa election. So we would love you to also go through the papers and see what that entails. I still have Rachel Tanzer with me. Thank you so much.
You're
Rachel.
welcome, Celine.
All right, let's take a look at the next paper, which is the Metrics newspaper. And on the paper here, we have federal government tangles 1 billion naira loan at 9% interest rate before large businesses. More details in the paper. Heritage Bank collapse. Here is what's next. Preferences given to secure depositors, verify creditors. And then we have shareholders fate unknown over negative stakeholders fund. More detail can be found in the paper. Fubara talks tough again, says enemies of Rivers desperate to frustrate him. You can read more in the paper. CBN lift restriction on OPay, Money Point, Kuka, and other OK's onboarding of new customers. We will recall there was a time they said they will be taking new customers again. So now they have actually lifted up that restriction. So if you would like to have an account with them, you can do well to follow the procedure and do just that. And new minimum wage, which is the big story. Truce at last. Federal government agreed to pay more than 60,000 naira at minimum wage. Also, we have Labour will convey urgent meeting to consider federal government commitment. More detail on page 2. Confusion over fate of Pastor Aluyomede. Source says he was transferred, not suspended. So for those who have been following that story, you can do well to read that on page 9. And still on strike, National Minimum Wage Act 2019 has expired, says Falana. Airfare in Nigeria rise by 0.25% in April 2024, NBS report published. As well, we have the picture stories talking Zenith Bank to the next level, as well as on the entertainment industry on page 14. And that's all of Metrics newspaper.
On Blueprint newspaper, let's return to negotiation table. Federal government begs Labour. Talks continue today as banks, airports, hospitals grounded nationwide. You can find details on page 8. NACA not responsible for Pilgrim's $500 BTA reduction. This is coming from Arabi. You can find details inside the paper. And the IC commences liquidation of Heritage Bank. On CVR, INEC urges sustained peace in Ondo. You can find details on page 4, and that's all the news on Blueprint newspaper.
On Daily News Hub, we have strike will aggregate hardship, 494,000 naira minimum wage unrealistic. This is coming from Labour Party. I do not know which side they are on, but let's just see how this whole story unfolds. More detail found in the paper. And on strike, Labour grounds Nigeria federal government blows hot and cold as ASU, TCN, and 30 other union down tools. Workers shut down National Grid, cut water, electricity supply to Asu Rock, National Assembly, and Airport. Judicial workers, while striking workers, shut down the SGF, summoned Labour to emergency meeting. And then we're seeing that Labour, federal government, to hold a fresh meeting today. So our fingers are crossed to see. We have pictures story here showing us some officials of the Judicial Staff Union of Nigeria manning the gate of the Federal High Court Abuja to ensure compliance with the ongoing nationwide strike declared by Labour on Monday, where we can see they have a flag of the NLC on the gate to actually indicate that they are on strike. Yobe doctors boycott nationwide strike, says we are not NLC affiliated. You can read more detail of that. Alleged influx of bandit Abuja, save police assure residents. As well, we have RCCG suspend transfer City of David pastor. You can find detail in the paper. Uni Ilori expels student from demanding ransom from missing colleague parents. Real Madrid signed Mbappe for 5 years. And then we have ascending to Labour's demand will cripple Nigeria's economy, coming from the presidency. And we have Biden's son Hunter stand trial on gone charged. You can find more detail for those who are interested in the international scene. And that's all on Daily News Hub newspaper.
On this day newspaper, Dangote eyes $30 billion in total revenue from his businesses by end of 2024. Discloses some IOCs unwilling to sell crude locally used to exporting. Says he will soon start making money from 650,000 barrel per day oil refinery. You can find details on page 9. Heritage Bank license revoked. IDIC moves to liquidate. First Bank paid off. You can find details on page 9. NAMA MD appeals for reversal of 50% IGR deduction in the interest of air safety. Details can be found on page 10. After Trump's conviction, Biden's son trial in federal gun case begins. Statement from U.S. President Jill: and I love our son and we are proud of the man he is today. You can start with the details on the front page and continue on page 9. Labor grounds Nigeria plunges country into total blackout. Federal government labor reach agreement as Tinubu commits to pay above 60,000 naira. Union to meet with organs to mull new deal. Tripartite committee to convene daily for a week. Leadership deficit is why states don't comply with 2019 Minimum Wage Act, NLC declares. And from CSOs shutting down national grid, three summoners, that is a statement from CSO. And country-wide reports show action impactful. You can find details on page 26. A picture story, excitement as Adara Omeoji resumes as Zenith Bank MD. And that's all the news on this day newspaper.
On the Daily Times newspaper, NLC refutes TMCCN alleged falsehood and nationwide strike as federal government summons a committee on national minimum wage meeting, detail found in the paper. Still on the minimum wage, federal government reaches compromise with organized labor amid nationwide strike, commits to pay the national minimum wage above 60,000 naira. And the president to Nigerians, he said, put nation first, race above politics of greater success, call unity of purpose to enhance Nigerians' infrastructural development. You can read more detail of what the president have to say concerning that in the paper. As well, Abia soldiers killing, Kadu inaugurate peace fund for victims. Federal government plans brigades to promote citizenship and core values. Here we have Niger government sign engagement bond with 30 student doctors. More detail found on page 2. And we have a picture story as well here where we are having some of the committee that are meeting on Monday at the French Embassy in Abuja to discuss area of mutual cooperation. You can do well to grab the paper and see what that agreement is all about, and that's all on Daily Times newspaper.
On Teen Trust, KSSSMB advocates entrepreneurship education at secondary school level. Details can be found on page 4. Sani Bello Science College wins CITAD's 2024 ICT quiz competition in Kano. Air Insurance Group announces 8 million naira scholarship for JSS AC competition. And there is a column on page 7 for lifestyle, career on page 5, well-being on page 14, and short stories on page 10. And that's all the news on Teen Trust newspaper.
On Business Day newspaper, Heritage Bank customers worry about deposit as NDIC steps in. Over 2,000 bankers enter job market as lender goes down. You can start on the front page and continue on page 29. And Kimberly Clark, 5 others exit Nigeria in 10 months. More detail found in the paper talking about some of the multinationals that have been exiting the country. As well, here we have indirect tax double to 1.4 trillion naira in boost to government revenues. Oil production at risk as labor threatens shutdown on page 29. Here we have labor ground grid, ports bank in blow to economy. And we have had subsidy luxury SUV poison negotiations. This is coming from Peter's side. You can find that in the paper. Wando swings to 75 billion naira after tax profit in 2023. We have two picture stories on the front page of the paper. You can do well to go through it and read more detail of any of the story that is of interest to you.
On Sporting Sun newspaper, Vinicius Jr. wins UCL Player of Season award. Details can be found at the back page. Real Madrid confirms Mbappe signing. Details also at the back page. France drops Mbappe Griezmann from Olympic team list. The big story, Lagos strike ground Super Eagles from Uyo camp. Training cancelled, Omokachi missing. Maize Cottle South Africa Wednesday arrival. You can find details on page 6. Man City to tie De Bruyne down to new deal. Chelsea willing to pay more than 100 million euros for Dembele. You can find details inside the paper. I'll bring eyes to Turkish football at Fenerbahce. This is a statement from Mourinho. Details can be found on page 3. Ferguson has finally forgiven me, coming from Mikel Obi. You can find details on page 6. West Ham no longer interested in Owoniyi. Details can be found on page 6. Arsenal to reduce Osimhen's £110 million fee with two players swap deal. Details can be found on page 6. Mike Tyson, Jake Paul bout officially postponed over Iron Mike's medical scare. You can find details at the back page. And then we have Maresca confirmed as new Chelsea head coach, signs 5-year deal. Leicester pockets $10 million in compensation. Al Nassr ready to offer 90 to 100 million euros for Casemiro. UEFA clears Man City Girona for Champions League. Details can be found on page 3. And that's all the news on Sporting Sun newspaper.
Well, that's how far we can go on the program this morning. Thank you, Rachel, for doing this with me. And also thank you to our viewers, our supporters, for making it out to watch the dailies. Until we come tomorrow, to have a great day ahead.